the president of General Motors, would you rather have him keep his money and create jobs, or do you want that money to go to Donald Trump or Joe Biden to create jobs? I'd much rather see people in the marketplace create jobs because they know where the jobs need to be created.
Warning. The political trade features probabilities and perspectives about politicians, political parties, political outcomes, and political wagering. The political trade is rated NSFP, not safe for partisans.
Welcome back to The Political Trade, the podcast for people with a passion for politics, probability, and profits. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, hosting the podcast where conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, partisans and wingnuts come together to learn about making money betting on politics by trading in the stock market for politics at predictit.org. We've got a very special episode today on the political trade. We will be interviewing, as our guest, a presidential candidate. Libertarian nominee for president, Dr. Jo Jorgensen, will be joining us in just a minute or two for an exclusive TPT town hall. We'll be asking her your questions and walking through some of the hot-button issues driving the headlines and election news today. As always, I'm joined by Mike Reddy. Mike is an editor at Luckbox magazine, a new prediction market trader, and the producer of the political trade. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Jeff. I know Dr. Jorgensen's on a real tight schedule. I know she's got another media hit coming up, so we should probably jump to it.
She is on the campaign trail, so let's do it. We'll bring her on in a moment, but the Libertarian platform has long promoted civil liberties, non-interventionism, free market capitalism, and the abolition of the welfare state. The party was founded in 1971, prompted in part due to concerns about the Nixon administration, the Vietnam War, and the draft. The party generally promotes a classical liberal platform in contrast to the Democrats' modern progressivism and the Republicans' conservatism. Gary Johnson was the party's presidential nominee in both 2012 and 2016. And he states that the Libertarian Party is more culturally liberal than Democrats, but more fiscally conservative than Republicans. The party perennially favors lowering taxes, abolishing the IRS, decreasing the national debt, allowing people to opt out of Social Security, eliminating the welfare state, and current social policy positions include ending the prohibition of illegal drugs, supporting same-sex marriage, ending capital punishment, and supporting gun ownership rights. We wish we had the time to speak with Dr. Jorgensen on all of these issues today, but our time is limited, so let's bring her on to learn more about where the party is headed and her specific policy positions. Dr. Jorgensen has recently appeared in the current issue of Luckbox magazine in our election issue. But what we were really looking forward to was this opportunity. We've seen the town halls lately, we've seen the debates, and we knew that there was someone missing. And she's now on the show with us today. So we welcome Dr. Jorgensen. Thanks for being here.
Oh, so glad to be here. And I like the way you phrased that. Yes, something was missing. Me.
Something was missing, right? Our audience knows who you are, but just for the sake of a brief introduction, the Libertarian Party nominee for the vice president in 1996 was also you as well, right? You were the vice presidential nominee under Harry Brown.
Yes.
You're born in Libertyville, Illinois, right?
Yes, it was destiny.
Yeah, there's a little bit of irony there. And you're teaching full-time, or you were teaching full-time since 2006 as senior lecturer in psychology at Clemson University. You've been following the team, by the way?
Oh my gosh, yes. In fact, we were traveling on the bus and we got, sometimes we could get satellite TV, and I got to catch part of 2 games on the bus. And so we tweeted that out, me with my Clemson shirt watching the games.
Well, that was actually an extraordinary game. In the last game, he's the Heisman frontrunner for sure. Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback, scored 5 touchdowns just in the first half alone, over 400 yards. And that was a wipeout victory. 73-7, I think the final score was, which has the Clemson Tigers atop of the AP poll right now. Do you
Yep.
follow sports much? Is that much
I
of an area of interest to you?
I follow college football, of course, and I received my PhD at Clemson, so it's my alma mater as well as I teach there. So it's, and I used to follow NFL pretty closely, but college football, there's just so much more spontaneity and unexpectedness. When I watch a professional football game the day after, it just looks kind of choreographed after all the surprises in college football.
Well, there's certainly a lot of surprises in the 73-7 blowout victory. So that's good. Well, let's get down to business with you. We spoke about the recently televised debates, and right after the debate, after the first debate, the CNN asked their listeners, which candidate are you most likely to vote for as a result of the debate? 32% said Biden, 11% said Trump, and 57% said neither. Clearly, a voice was missing, and again, we're glad to have you on as a result of that. What is the ongoing struggle with libertarian candidates? We understand what the CPD does, and we talked about it a little bit in your interview. But do you see any light at the end of that tunnel?
Well, we'll see. The Libertarian Party headquarters has been trying to put on their own debate, and they're trying to get notable people to put out op-eds saying, "Hey, where are the challengers?" So they actually have reserved space in a major city, and I don't know if they'll have me standing on the stage by myself saying, "Where are the other two?" or what. But they're trying to get across the idea, "Hey, we've got to break through." And I don't know if how closely you followed that, but you need to get to 15% in the polls in order to get on the debate. So in 2016, they started including Gary Johnson in the polls right away, early on, and he got up to as high as 13.6, so almost. Well, this time around, and I thought, well, there's not much more to go. Surely we can pass 15%. Well, this time around, what they did was they didn't even put my name in the polls. So, first of all, I can't be in the debates if my name's not even in the polls. But secondly, by having your name reported on the news in the polls, then more people hear about you, more people find out, oh, wow, there's a third choice out there that I didn't even know about.
Well, the subject of polling is something that we cover regularly on our podcast, The Political Trade. And a couple of weeks ago, in what was one of our highest rated episodes ever, pollster Robert Cahaley was on from the Trafalgar Group. And he's known for having called the 2016 electoral outcome down to the actual vote. His differentiator, which is a little bit controversial to say the least, is what he refers to as the social desirability bias, and correcting for
Yes,
that.
yes.
He traces the roots of that back to the Bradley effect, of course, named after the Los Angeles mayor Tom Bradley, and the 1982 election, which had him winning despite the actual election vote turning out the other way. And he identifies the shy Trump voter and then tries to correct for it in his polling. What do you think about that? You've been traveling the country. Do you think there is a shy Trump voter out there? Is that a real thing?
Oh, well, I can tell you that social desirability bias is a real thing because I teach it in class. So absolutely, people will do that. And I was one of the few people who, I wish I'd had a microphone in 2016 because I was telling everybody I knew that, yeah, Trump's going to win because all you had to do is drive around and see all the Trump signs in what they call flyover in the flyover states. And people don't want to admit it. And yeah, I think absolutely that would happen.
Well, we didn't have you on to ask you about Donald Trump. So that really is a lead into the question, is there a shy libertarian voter? And have you been able to quantify or substantiate that to any degree?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. Uh, many libertarians are actually very proud and forceful. In fact, here's the problem we used to have is when people hadn't heard of us. So back in the 80s, I've heard people say, well, they were polled, somebody called them, are you voting for Reagan or Mondale or, whoever? And they'll say, well, I'm voting for Ed Clark or I'm voting for the Libertarian. And the pollster would say, "Oh, okay, I'll mark you down as undecided," and it's like, "No, no, no, I'm very decided. I'm voting for Ed Clark," and it did not compute. So at least now people have heard of the Libertarian Party and understand what it stands for. So there may be some people out there who are hesitant, however, but I would say, the biggest problem is that there are people who would agree with us if they just knew about the party or looked into it. And I've seen some estimates that 40 million people are libertarian leaning. They think that we should be able to live and let live. And yet, either they're not getting the news about us or they're getting misinformation about us or something like that.
Well, you mentioned 2016, and of course, Gary Johnson and Bill Weld did have an excellent showing for the Libertarian Party during that year with about 4.5 million votes and 3.27% of the popular vote recorded in that election. And there were some states that did exceptionally well as well. So, of course, New Mexico, where Johnson is governor or was governor, there was a 9.3% Libertarian vote. North Dakota saw 6.2%. Oklahoma saw 5.8%. Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, South Dakota, Colorado, and Maine all had over 5% of the popular vote for cast with the Libertarian Party in that state. Based on your travels and your campaigns thus far this year, what are the states that you expect to have the best showing in?
Well, first of all, I've been told that I'm polling high in Alaska, something like 8%, and which is higher than Gary Johnson, I might add. Although I did visit Alaska. In fact, they said I was the first presidential candidate running for office in, I don't know, years and years to visit Alaska. Also, the one state that I requested my campaign take me to is Maine, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but they've got ranked choice voting this time
Sure.
around, where we no longer have the wasted vote argument up there. So I'm hoping to do well in Maine, and I'd like to. Just for curiosity's sake, I can't wait to see how much this polling changes things. I think it will, but we'll see.
Well, let's talk about ranked choice voting. Are you in favor of it?
Oh, absolutely, because then people can vote for what they want instead of out of fear.
And let's see, Maine in ranked choice voting, essentially, the concept is that it eliminates the spoiler effect, right? Where votes for third party candidates are taking votes away from
Right.
one of the two candidates, or it eliminates what's considered a wasted vote. And I've always found that to be a controversial idea of the wasted vote. So the notion of a wasted vote, that's been tagging the Libertarian Party for a long, long time. And I speak from experience. In my own state in Illinois, where I've lived and voted for over 30 years, 6 presidential elections, I've voted third party more than I've voted Democrat or Republican in that state. Just for the purpose of disclosure, I've always tried to understand why there are not more third party votes in dark red or dark blue states. And I'm going somewhere with this question because I'm going to put this on you. So in fact, I can make the case for why, if you are in a dark red or a dark blue state, you are essentially wasting your vote if you're voting for one of the two party candidates because the outcome is so predetermined, right? If you're in New York, Illinois, California, that's a dark blue state. If you're in Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Montana, it's a dark red state. And we found already that 47% of the people in this election are voting against a candidate, not in favor of one. So they're voting against Trump or they're voting against Biden. So if you're a Trump voter in the heartland in Nebraska, and you see Biden as everything you hate about politics, so your perception is he's a 5-decade swamp dweller who's traded on political positions to enrich his family. He's been wrong on about every major foreign and domestic policy issue and was written off for dead by his own party until he was revived in the 11th hour. And so you're going to vote for Trump. Aren't you just wasting your vote? And conversely, and because we're into equal time here, let's say you're a voter in New York, California, or Illinois, and you see Trump as a race baiting narcissist, an embarrassment on the global stage, or someone who just can't tell the truth, or who has made the conscious decision at key cultural events and moments like a booming economic recovery or after the Floyd riots or during the pandemic to divide our nation rather than bringing people together. And you have to vote against him. But you're in Illinois, California, New York. Your vote really doesn't matter. Doesn't it make more sense to send a message instead of voting against a candidate? You decide to essentially send a message that you want more diversity and choice in your election. So I've always maintained that and advocated for third party votes in these hard dark blue or dark red states. But as you know, Candace, the outcomes are determined by the swing states. What is the case that you make to swing state voters to make a third party vote?
Well, I say you're the one who can really make a difference. And by the way, let me quickly add, yes, that's exactly what I've been telling the red staters and the blue staters. Look, Trump is going to get all the electoral college votes anyway. So if you like the fact that he's got a deficit that's going up faster than Obama's, if you like the fact that he's given us the biggest debt ever, if you like the fact that he's not balancing the budget, sure, go ahead and vote for him. But if you want to send him a message that, hey, we voted for you because you said you were an outsider, you said you were a businessman who could take care of things, then vote for me to send him the message of, hey, we don't like the job you're doing, because he's going to get all your electoral votes anyway. And then I tell the blue states, look, I remember the Democratic Party from the 1960s. They were anti-war. They were pro-little guy, pro-free speech. And now they're none of that. And by the way, is Joe Biden your first pick? Or was your first pick Tulsi Gabbard, the only anti-war candidate, and they muzzled her, took her off the stage? Or was your choice Bernie Sanders, who they both, bought off? If your choice was Joe Biden and you like the crime bill and the fact that he's a war hawk, go ahead and vote for him. But if you want to send a message to the Democratic Party establishment, hey, we want to pick our own candidate, then vote for me. But yes, to the swing states, I say, you know what? They're really watching you. And if you want them to change your behavior, if you vote for me, then you are sending a very strong message that, hey, you have got to get your act together or we're going to go elsewhere.
What has been the experience that we learned from Kanye's campaign about the difficulty of a third party to get on the ballot and to get visibility and traction?
Yeah, a lot of people have, kind of laughed about him being on the ballot, but I'm glad he's doing this. I'm glad he's calling attention to the fact that you can show up 20 seconds or 30 seconds late, whatever, and that they've got such ridiculously high standards. Well, I hate to say standards, but let's say an unreasonable hoop to jump through. And, we've always had some ballot access issues, but after we were, by the way, the only party other than the Democrats and Republicans to be on the ballot in all 50 states and back-to-back presidential elections, after we did that, some of the states were like, wow, you know what? They're gaining. Guess we better up the ante. And so if you look, people are talking about the Green Party, but they're only on the ballot in 29 states. And because they've been increasing how difficult it is to get on the ballot. And again, you can thank the Libertarian Party for that because we are gaining on them. However, we are on the ballot in all 50 states. And we're last time, and it looks like it's going to be a regular thing. So I'm glad that Kanye West is calling attention to that.
The past few days, we've seen a story emerge in the New York Post that has subsequently been censored by both Facebook and Twitter. What's your take on that? With not the story itself about
Right.
Hunter Biden and his emails, but about the censorship that some social media platforms have chosen with particular stories?
Well, first of all, that's not government censorship. It is a private company deciding to not publish something, and they have that right to. However, I think they're very stupid, and they put themselves out there as, "Hey, we're the town hall. We're here for an exchange of ideas." And they're almost portraying themselves as kind of a utility, but they're not acting like one. And I don't think that there should be laws against people being stupid. And I think the free market can do a much better job of getting them in line than the government can. And I've been pointing back to IBM. The Justice Department had a 13-year lawsuit with IBM that lasted the entire decade of the 70s. I was actually working for IBM in the early 80s when the Justice Department finally dropped the lawsuit. And back then they were saying, well, there's enough paperwork from the Justice Department that it could go to the moon and back in all of the stuff. And yet the Justice Department couldn't bring them down, couldn't break them up. Who did bring them down was two guys in their garage who started Apple Computer. So now that Apple's big, I'm saying I have more faith in the individuals in this country. I have more faith in the free market bringing them down than the government.
Do you think that's reasonable considering the absolute scale that the likes of Facebook, Google, and Amazon and other tech companies have achieved today?
Well, that's what they said about IBM. In fact, about IBM, they said, look at the capitalization, look at all these factories. You can't just, nobody else could ever be as big as IBM because they don't have enough money to build all these big factories. Well, you don't have to build big factories to compete against Facebook and Twitter. And I know especially younger people, they look at Facebook and they say, oh my gosh, it's so big. Nobody could ever take them down. But all we have to do is, look through history. Big businesses come and they go. Now, the one caveat here is that a lot of times companies get big because of government, because Congress passes special laws for them. And in fact, some corporations even have people writing the laws that they hand to the Congress people. So I would be worried about that, about Congress people doing something to protect them. But as long as we have a halfway free market, and a lot of people are getting fed up with this. A lot of people are saying, I didn't know that you were watching me so closely. I didn't know you were taking down all this information. So I'm hoping that again, a company can take down Google and Twitter and Facebook the way they took down IBM, especially since it's going to take a heck of a lot less money.
In our interview with you in the current issue of Luckbox magazine, we noted that it's very difficult for a new administration to accomplish many things. We've seen that time and time again, that it's often been said by political insiders that you can accomplish one or two major things in any administration. So we asked you what your short list was, and you focused on healthcare, you focused on ending foreign wars and foreign engagement, and on crime and how we prosecute crime, and freeing nonviolent offenders. So I want to focus in on those three areas if we can. Obamacare. What's your beef with Obamacare?
Everything. There's not a single good thing about it. First of all, it's not really insurance. They kept talking about insurance. Secondly, it raised prices, which any economist could have told you that ahead of time. And it's not working. It's not doing what it said it would do. The one message I would want to get to every voter out there is that we do not have a free market healthcare system, because we keep hearing politicians out there saying, well, the free market doesn't work, so we're going to have to go to single payer. And all we have to do is look to the VA hospital. When they say Medicare for all, what I'm hearing them say is VA hospital for all, and top-down monopolies do not work. And I'm just befuddled as to why these people on the left who are so against corporate monopolies are all of a sudden in favor of a huge federal government monopoly, which, oh, by the way, is a life or death situation. They're in charge of our medications and whether we live or die. Why would they be for a monopoly when it comes to the government? That would be even harder to go up against.
Much of the sentiment on this issue, on the healthcare issue, which is certainly a driving issue for most voters, is pre-existing conditions. And you could have the knee-jerk reaction that a free market would be less inclined to insure someone against pre-existing condition, just because that raises the cost of the risk pool and the cost of that. So what comfort could you provide a voter that a free market healthcare system would protect pre-existing conditions, which seems to be the messaging that the Democratic Party is really resonating with its voters right now on threats to the threat to Obamacare is really that specific threat, that you lose the coverage of pre-existing conditions?
Well, first of all, keep in mind, we're the only country in the industrialized world to have our health insurance tied to our employment. So if we lose our job, now we've got to go somewhere else and get different coverage. Or, by the way, if we hate our job, sometimes we don't want to quit because, or we want to quit, but we feel we can't because our health care is tied to it. So if you could have one insurance company like you do with your car insurance company and keep it, then part of that problem goes away because you would be with the company that you originally got that, those conditions with. The other thing is, we would bring the prices down dramatically. If you look at Singapore, which has a somewhat free market system, their costs are one third of what our costs are. And some of the price differences are amazing, such as a heart bypass here costs $130,000, but over there it costs $18,000. So wouldn't that be great to have prices reduced so much to the price of a car, to where even if your health insurance couldn't pay for it, you could somehow pay for it? And last, people don't realize how many restrictions there are keeping private charity from helping people. So if you look at the government, the federal government especially, compared to private charity, in the early 1990s, the United Way president spent something like $400,000 on artwork. And what happened was donations dried up. By the way, $400,000 back then is closer to $1 million today. And people said, no, we didn't give you that money for artwork. We gave you that money to help unwed mothers, to help people, with medical problems and so forth. And what happened was they had to prove to their donors, okay, we're putting the money where it should be spent. We're spending it well. Now look at that same money going to the federal government. We know that the government has a ridiculous overhead. And we all heard about the UN ambassador drapes. What did they cost? 50,000, 80,000, something like that. We
Nice
can't,
drapes.
yeah, we can't say, well, we don't like you spending money on those drapes, so we're going to withhold our money. And if you look at how much better private charity works, you've got the Ronald McDonald House, you've got Shriners, you've got all these things where they pay for things, they pay for everything. And in fact, that's something that I experienced. My daughter had a learning disability, and we went to a local charity who paid for all of her speech therapy for years. And then later, when we were established and had more money, then we donated back to that charity. And that is such a much better system than the federal government, with all the bureaucracy and everything else that's going wrong with it. And I'd like to point out, charity was handled so much better when it was handled at the local level. And it wasn't until Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty that poverty had been decreasing. And after Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty started, then it started leveling off. So government, gets into it and makes things worse. And if you don't mind, let me add one last thing. When people ask me why I'm running for president, I tell them it's because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. But the worst part is they usually end up hurting the very people they try to help. So again, with charity, poverty is dropping, government gets a war on poverty, and then all of a sudden poverty is no longer falling. We tried to, what happened in World War II was they had a wage and price freeze control. And so companies could no longer entice new employees over with a high salary. So instead, they started giving them benefits. So now we're the ones decades later paying the price, because now that's why our benefits, nobody ever asks, hey, how come we're the only country in which our health insurance is tied to our employment? Well, it's because of what the government did in World War II. So every time the government tries to fix a problem, they create 10 more. So why are we looking towards government?
Well, in addressing healthcare, in the interview you did with us with Luckbox magazine, you conceded that, in your words, we cannot move to a free market overnight. And to the specific question, should there be a safety net? You said yes initially.
Yeah, we can't just pull the rug out and then say, okay, everybody, you're on your own. And my plan is to have a system that's similar to Singapore, or similar to the state of Indiana and state of Indiana employees. And what I would do is I would put healthcare dollars in the hands of veterans, in the hands of people on Medicare, Medicaid, and SSI and so forth. and then they would start the ball rolling to get the prices down, because right now the prices are too inflated with the government. So we have to start somewhere, and that would be a first step towards a free market.
Let's move on. We know today there's well over 200,000 troops. Maybe you know the total better than we do, that are stationed overseas bases across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and Latin America. Why are they there?
That's a good question. That's what I would ask Trump, who said that he would bring the troops home.
But
And
what? But why are they there? I think voters ask it all the time. So what prevents anyone, a president, from? Because we know there's things that presidents say, and then they get inside the Oval Office, like Obama talking about Guantanamo, and then said, "Oh, maybe that's not as easy as I thought." And despite the pledge, he was never able to close Guantanamo. And presidents have talked about bringing our troops home forever. Why are there 200,000 troops overseas?
Well, again, that's a good question, because the president has complete control over bringing them home, because he is, or she is, the commander in chief. I would suggest it's the military industrial complex that, again, we've got lobbyists and special interests putting money in there. You look at the people in the Pentagon. First of all, there are a lot of people whose jobs depend on us being everywhere. And a lot of those people with highly paid salaries, once they retire, now they can be a consultant, in which they make more money in a month than the average person makes in a year. So they don't want that to stop from happening. And so there's a lot of money behind it. I guess a quick answer is money.
It was money. You have mentioned that on day one of the Jorgensen administration, you had pardoned Snowden, Ross Ulbricht, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and others. Um, Make the case for Snowden's release.
If there is no victim, there is no crime. I mean, end of story.
Well, in 2013, as a contractor with the NSA, he leaked documents to journalists that exposed the United States mass surveillance of telephone records, and was brought up on espionage charges, which he never faced by running off to Russia and seeking asylum over there. Now, 7 years later, on September 2nd, I think, of this year, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit said that the U.S. surveillance of phone records was indeed illegal. So, if that's the case, then why hasn't he been pardoned, or why are those charges are still outstanding?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And I would suggest that he was getting information to people that we should have been, able to get to anyway.
What about Ross Ulbricht? Obviously, so here's an interesting story, right? He was the creator and the infrastructure behind the Silk Road, which notably was a marketplace for illicit drugs. By the way, to clarify your position, would you decriminalize all drugs or just marijuana?
All drugs.
All drugs,
And could I speak to that for just a minute?
please.
As far as the uh, decriminalizing drugs, what I've been going around asking people is, when's the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to push gin onto high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support a vodka habit? And when's the last time you heard of two liquor store owners having a shootout over the best corner? These are not drug problems. They're drug prohibition problems. And just like we had problems in the 1920s with Al Capone and the shootings and innocent people, now we've got shootings in Chicago for the same reason, only instead of alcohol prohibition, now it's drug prohibition. So, and to anybody who says, well, but I don't use drugs, I never have, so it doesn't affect me. Well, my answer is, yeah, I don't use drugs either, never have. Well, actually, my drug of choice is bourbon, but I don't use illegal drugs, never have. However, it's affecting us all in the safety of our streets, our schools, and every other place. And I was in a discussion with somebody who said, well, I'm for legalizing marijuana, but I don't want to legalize crystal meth. I mean, I don't want a meth house next to mine, because, it's dangerous. There's all these chemicals. If there have been people who've bought meth houses and there's toxic substances, and then the kids are near the toxic substances. And I said, yeah, well, that's why we need to make meth legal, because when's the last time you heard of anybody making bathtub gin? I want Seagrams or Philip Morris or one of those countries making meth, not the guy next door. How about let's make us safer by decriminalizing it the way we have with alcohol?
Well, your platform would release nonviolent offenders, so that's not just drug convictions. That would
Right.
include prostitution.
Hmm.
What else?
Oh, gambling. Eh, I mean, those would probably be the main ones. And, we've even got laws now against certain types of vaping, how people are selling flavored vaping. And remember, the Eric Garris, I believe his name was, in New York, he was selling loosies. So basically, people selling cigarettes. Uh, I would say that that's a nonviolent crime.
The American criminal justice system has about 2.2, 2.3 million people in over 1,800 state prisons and over 100 federal prisons. Drugs alone in state prisons, that's 45,000 people. If they're all released on day one, how do they integrate back in society? What would be the plan that gets them back? I- If there was a mass release of incarcerated people, how would our towns and villages and society cope with that?
Well, first of all, I can only release them at the federal level. And I would encourage states to release theirs as well. However, I can't imagine it would all be on day one. I'm sure that would take governors quite a bit of time to do that. And there may be states who don't do it at all. So we can easily do it at the federal level. And we start by chopping down the size of government so people keep more of their own funds so they can go out and purchase things. So we've got more of a vibrant economy, so that people are opening up more restaurants. So we've got more, whatever industry it is where people can spend their own money. Research has shown that money left in the hands of individuals, left in the hands of business, creates twice as many jobs as that same money that goes to the federal government. And again, people have asked me, for instance, about wealth distribution, how it's unfair that people at the top have all this money. And well, first of all, I would suggest that it's much better having our inequality than inequality where we have totalitarianism, where we've got people, if you want to see wealth inequality, just go look at dictators and poor people, the poor people in their countries. But would you rather have, the president of General Motors, would you rather have him keep his money and create jobs? Or do you want that money to go to Donald Trump or Joe Biden to create jobs? I'd much rather see people in the marketplace create jobs, because they know where the jobs need to be created. And it's not that the corporations are so great. It's that they're taking the lead from us. So we're letting people, we're sending a message to companies what we want. And I just don't understand. I was taught in the 5th grade how the reason the Soviet Union didn't work is you had central planning where they had to decide, where does the steel go? And they had to decide, does the steel go towards refrigerators or cars? Whereas in our country, it was prices who told us where the steel goes. If more people want cars, if there's a waiting list, then the automobile manufacturers are willing to pay a higher price. If people don't want to buy new cars, then they pay a lower price, and then the refrigerator manufacturers get it. So such a simple thing of having us, the American citizens, the American voters, decide where the money goes instead of having it centrally planned. I don't understand why that lesson still isn't taught, and why the people who are running our country don't understand what made our country so great to begin with. And that's part of it.
Understood. As someone who's long subscribed to libertarian thinking and readings and philosophies, I've often been asked the so-called gotcha questions. So I'm going to pass them on to you. Like if, as a libertarian that respects above all the rights of the individual and liberty, which takes precedence on the rights of the mother or the life of the unborn child?
That is a problem. Well, that's an issue that libertarians struggle with, as well as people outside the party. Everybody is struggling with that. And the Libertarian Party platform, which I'm running on, says that the government needs to stay out of it. Harry Brown used to jokingly say, he was my running mate in 96, he used to jokingly say that if you get the government involved, pretty soon men would be having abortions. My quick answer is that even the staunchest pro-choice libertarian would never spend a single penny of taxpayers' dollars on abortions, on Planned Parenthood, on whatever. And the Republican Party, who has a pro-life platform, can't say that.
To be clear, are you pro-choice?
I don't talk about that personally. I'm just putting forth the Libertarian Party platform, which says that government should stay out of it.
To stay out of it. Who builds the roads?
The people who
And
drive
I've never
on
understood why that's supposedly a gotcha question. I think but it's asked all the time. So who builds the roads?
the people who drive on it, the people who want to provide that service for people who want to drive on it. No, but let me quickly answer this by saying not the federal government. We saw in the 1990s how, before the 1990s, the different states had different drinking ages. And then Elizabeth Dole, transportation secretary, basically held the state's money hostage. So we as American citizens paid our money to the federal government, and then the federal government said, okay, we're not going to give you your money back to build roads unless you raise the drinking age to 21. Now, we can have a debate. Maybe 21 is a better drinking age, but I would suggest that the federal government is not the one to make that decision. It's the states. And that's the problem with running everything through the federal government, is then they start making dictates. And so I would suggest that, the federal government stay out of that, and we'll let the states decide how they want to do that.
All right, 3 more lightning round questions, because I know we're running short on time. More and more voters lately, including as many as 68% Republicans, 62% of independents, 59% of Democrats, 72% of African Americans, and 73% of Hispanics are favoring choice and vouchers in education. What's the Libertarian platform on that issue?
I am running for president. That education is a local issue. It should be decided among parents, teachers, and students. And as president, I will work my hardest to get rid of the Department of Education, which gives a one-size-fits-all to everybody. And I will leave it up to the localities to decide. As president, I should have no say in that.
Okay, 2 softballs. How do you know if you're a libertarian?
I guess if you believe that you know how to spend your money better than any politician and bureaucrat in Washington, that you think that you have the choice, that you should be able to make your own choices and not the bureaucrats in Washington, and that you believe other people are the same way, that they can spend their money better and they should be allowed to, and they should be allowed to make their own choices.
Speaking of choices, what's your bourbon of choice?
Well, they're making some, actually. My daughter, who went to graduate school in Indiana, came back with this uncut bourbon called Backbone that you can only buy in Indiana. And I discovered I love uncut bourbon. It never occurred to me, why are all of the proofs the same in the liquor store? You see 80 proof or 100 proof, whatever. Sure. Oh, yeah, it's because they add water to it. Oh, geez, this tastes really good when they don't add water to it. So that's what I like.
It's barrel strength, right?
Yep.
What about name brands? I always see you drinking bourbon when you're in videos.
Well, yes, because now this has been great. My husband jokingly said, "Is that why you ran for president? Because everybody gives you bourbon." It's kind of become a joke that people give me bourbon now. So I haven't paid for my own bourbon now in about 4 months. So I wonder if I have to declare that to the FEC. Maybe I better check into that.
It's a good gig, right?
Yes.
On that alone. How should people follow you and follow and perhaps contribute to your campaign?
To please go to jo20.com. That's jo20.com, and read about my platform. And I think that you'll see that you agree with us more than the actions of the other two parties. You may like their platforms, but let me point out, when I ran for VP in 1996, I talked about, my stump speech was how Republican politicians keep selling out freedom. And I made a distinction between the many fine Republican voters who wanted small government and the Republican politicians who were giving them bigger government.
Your campaign website is joe20.com. On Twitter, you're Jorgensen4, the number 4 POTUS. At Twitter, thank you so much for your time. You gave us a hard stop. We're a minute afterwards. I know you're busy right now. So, Dr. Jorgensen, thank you very much for your time. We wish we had another 2 hours with you. We could certainly use them. And we're going to be following your campaign very, very closely from now on through
Okay.
November.
Well, maybe after the campaign, I'll still be around. So thank
We
you.
look forward to having you back. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a great day.
So just a couple of announcements before we wrap. Of course, we're looking forward to inviting Tom Sosnoff, a legendary options trader, into the TPT studios soon. He'll be on to share his ideas and wisdom about how to trade effectively using the predicted markets, binary options, and risk management in political prediction market trading. We'll also have some 11th hour pre-election day trading advice from your favorite TPT alums who will be joining us soon. So that's going to wrap up today's episode. Thanks for tuning into The Political Trade. Tell your friends about us and make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And check out thepoliticaltrade.com to sign up for our newsletter, find us on social media, or send us a message. It's all there at thepoliticaltrade.com. So thanks again for joining us today. This is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
And remember to believe in math, master your trade, and join us next time on The Political Trade.